Welcome everyone. Thank you for your patience. Yeah, this is definitely Francesco to be lifted eventually for you. Benvenuti to Magazzino Italian Art. Welcome to Magazzino Italian Art. I'm Vittorio Calabrese, the director here, and I'm just overly excited about this opportunity to welcome you back. And to also welcome back Francesco Guzzetti to Magazzino, where many things started for both of us. Magazzino is a museum and research center dedicated to Italian post-war and contemporary art. We are at our 5th year of activities. We are a foundation that has a strong core on the Arte Povera movement. As you see, you are literally surrounded by some of the best examples of the works in the collections that was created by our founders, Nancy Olnick and Giorgio Spanu. They couldn't be here, but also welcome you all. I was just speaking to them, actually. They're just like very excited about this program as much as they love Kounellis and Francesco. It's been in the mission of the museum not just to exhibit post-war and contemporary Italian art, but also to deepen its research and to open new conversations and actually reimagine a little bit some of the worlds that the work of Arte Povera kind of suggests. And we open a scholarship as soon as we open Magazzino. It's a scholarship, actually we call it Scholar in Residence Fellowship here at Magazzino, where we invite one scholar each year to live in the Hudson Valley with us, to actually study the collection. We have a research center here, and William is our research center coordinator in the back. And if you want afterwards, you can also go see some of the archival and special collection materials that we have on Kounellis out. Francesco was the first one. And we didn't even formalize it well at that point, but I'm very excited also because we have Roberta Minucci, that is our current scholar in residence. She just arrived a few months ago. She's here in Cold Spring, and you're going to hear a lot about her and from her in the next series that will actually start in March. I know it's going to be a long program, but I have to thank Francesco. I want to thank the Archivio Kounellis, the estate Kounellis, Damiano Kounellis, Michel Coudray for their support, all the partners that actually helped us to make this project possible, Calixto, Bruno, Corà, a number of other people that I know Francesco will also mention more scholarly throughout. And I'm also gonna introduce you formally to Francesco Guzzetti. Francesco Guzzetti is a tenure-track assistant professor of modern and contemporary art at the University of Florence. He graduated at University of Pisa and Scuola Normale Superiore di Pisa, from which he holds a PhD in art history. His research revolves around Italian art from the early post-war years to the 1980s, with a special focus on the relationship with the United States. He has received fellowship and grants from CIMA, the Center for Italian Modern Art, that I'm very thankful that actually somehow brought you here in the first place, and Laura Mattioli, the Bibliothèque Kandinsky, St. George Pompidou in Paris, Harvard University, and Magazzino Italian Art Foundation, among others. He has curated exhibitions and published in several scholarly journals and exhibition catalogs, including a number of projects that we did with you. Which one of them was actually here in the Hudson Valley at SUNY New Paltz at the Dorsky, which also include Jannis Kounellis. And if you're interested, there's actually some of the essays are on our website. It was a deep research in works on paper by Kounellis, Calzolari, and Boetti, including which is something like, definitely like a bigger project, the catalog of the recent exhibition of Giuseppe Pennone at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris. I want to welcome Francesco to the podium and thank you all for being with us today. Thanks.
So, well, thank you very much to you all for being here today. I would like to thank Vittorio for inviting me to do this program today, and it's quite an emotion for me to be back here where I spent a whole year of my life a few years ago. So it's a real pleasure to be here today with all of you. When Vittorio first asked me to think about a program concerning Jannis Kounellis, to celebrate Jannis Kounellis on the occasion also of the retrospective at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, I started to collect ideas, and I wanted to focus on a relatively unknown side of his art and practice. I then soon realized that many artists, from the South Korean Seung-Gun Chung to the Greek Ivan Katsantila or the German Felix Schramm, proudly recalled their time as mentees of Kounellis, sharing fond memories and expressing their debt towards the artist to an extent that goes farther beyond the simple homage to a great master. There was something more intimate and profound that connected these artists to their former mentor, a thread which extends until today. And so the whole program will revolve around, as the title says, Jannis Kounellis as mentor and his teaching experience. The aim of my introductory remark is just to very briefly contextualize the teaching practice of Kounellis, leaving most of the room to the protagonists who are going to share their insights today, starting from Michel Coudray, the partner of many years of Kounellis and now president of Archivio Kounellis in Rome, and Bruno Corà, a lifelong friend of the artist who sits in the board of Archivio, whom I thank for agreeing to give me an interview, which has been recorded and will be screened right after my introduction. And then Calixto Ramírez, one of the artists who had the chance to study with Kounellis during a workshop and built up a relationship, a friendship with him, which lasted until the end of Kounellis' life, is here today. Calixto, whom I thank, will join me in a conversation at the end of this program to discuss Kounellis' legacy vis-à-vis his own practice. Kounellis held the class of sculpture at Kunstakademie, the Academy of Fine Arts in Düsseldorf, from 1993 to 2001. He would then hold a few workshops in Europe between 2004 and 2009. At the time when he took up his teaching position in Düsseldorf, Kounellis was already one of the most famous and established artists of his generation. The artist was born in 1936. Internationally recognized. Born in Greece, based in Italy, Kounellis felt quintessentially and convincedly European, and elaborated most of his work around a thorough investigation of the roots of such a multifaceted identity. Soon after starting teaching in Düsseldorf, he could fully express his artistic commitment in one of the most outstanding exhibitions he'd ever had. In fall 1994, upon invitation of a Greek foundation, Kounellis set up a solo show inside the merchant ship Ionian, anchored in the port of Piraeus, which was, by the way, the place where Kounellis was born. The artist incorporated previous works within a broader installation in which he assembled rusty scrap taken from docks, oxidized steel plates, worn burlap sacks, and stones, thus creating a set which profoundly resonated with and amplified his art. Most of the artist's major concerns coalesced in the show. The importance of the journey as a metaphor of the artist's life and practice. The love for theater and Greek tragedy as the most powerful expression of the innermost feelings defining human life. The emphasis of poetic evocation conveyed through the juxtaposition of materials burdened with history and cultural references. The centrality of human being, expressed by, for instance, taking human size as a fundamental unit of measurement, such as by using metal plates, as in these two works which were reintegrated in the 1994 exhibition, metal plates measuring the size of the standard double bed frame. And finally, the artist's conception of his own practice as painting, intended indeed not as a medium, but rather as an attitude, to elaborate images by emphasizing the frontal view and placing artworks either upright or flat as if they were iconic relics to be revealed. As Michel Coudray and Bruno Corà will explain in the interview, the confrontation with the past played an essential role in Kounellis' process of construction of his own identity and awareness. In this respect, the installation of his works had always depended on the architecture and decoration of the space where his exhibitions took place. By connecting the work and the space, the artist was able to directly confront the past, the tradition of art and art history, and evoke symbols and broader resonances. As it happened, and probably that was like the culmination of this approach, in 2005, when he was invited to exhibit at the National Library in Sarajevo, which had recently been restored following the bombing of August 1992 during the War of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which resulted in the destruction of millions of books. And Kounellis basically filled up the doorways of the former library building. I'm sorry for the line in the middle, it's just the spread of the book from which I took the scan. So that's of course not part of the artwork. How did Kounellis pass his unique vision along to his students? And which role did the teaching practice play within the artist's broader practice? In my investigation, I reached out and interviewed a few students and assistants, among whom I would like to mention and thank especially the German artist Christiane Löhr, who studied with him between 1994 and 1997, and the Austrian artist Eduard Winklhofer, who met Kounellis at the Academy of Fine Arts in Perugia in 1982, and would be his assistant for almost the whole duration of his appointment in Düsseldorf. A few details should be clearer beforehand, before approaching directly the issue of Kounellis' teaching practice. Kounellis didn't speak any language but Italian and Greek. Besides being the coordinator of the class, Eduard Winklhofer was the translator who allowed him to communicate with students coming from all over Europe and the world. However, as it will be explained in the video and as will become clear in the conversation with Calixto as well, Kounellis had a truly charismatic presence and used a highly figurative language by which he could evoke images and references that somehow came through, transcending any language barrier. That's what all the people I interviewed told me. Even though we didn't really grasp the words he used, he was able to evoke something that somehow came through and affected us. Kounellis didn't show up regularly in Düsseldorf due to the busy exhibition schedule he had at the time. Yet, once he was there, his effort was to spend as much time as possible with his students. He could stay in Düsseldorf for 1 or 2 months and stay all the time with the students, and then be elsewhere for the following 3 months, for instance. Kounellis in the academy in Düsseldorf held the class of sculpture, but we shouldn't be misled by this title. Kounellis accepted it just because it was the title of the position which was vacant at the time when he was asked by the dean of the School of Fine Arts, the painter Markus Lüpertz, to join the faculty. Conceiving his work as painting in the sense I've just briefly hinted at, Kounellis didn't pay any real attention to the medium of the artistic expression, as long as it came through as genuine and culturally aware. This resulted in the widest spectrum of expressive means employed by the students. As opposed to the highly selective standard of the academy, Kounellis accepted almost everyone to his class: painters, sculptors, performers, video and filmmakers. He never had specific preferences based on mediums or technique, nor he was ever inclined to instruct the class according to specific rules. He never lectured, nor prepared any speech for the class. In fact, there are no notes surviving of his class. Eduard Winklhofer still retains a vivid memory of the first class held by Kounellis in Düsseldorf. The artist showed up and sat at a table surrounded by students. Everyone remained silent for solid 30 minutes until he asked Eduard why the students didn't speak. Kounellis, in fact, always wanted the students to show him their work in first place, and then he would respond to it by making a critique which would often conjure up the most intriguing and unexpected references to the art world and the history of culture. During a trip to Tuscany, organized by the class in 1996, Kounellis joined often his students and spent much time with them in front of the Rucellai Madonna, the late 13th century altarpiece by Duccio di Buoninsegna at Uffizi Galleries, or viewing the frescoes of Masaccio in the church of Santa Maria del Carmine, or in front of the Madonna del Parto by Piero della Francesca in Monterchi. He basically shared the inspirations which ultimately led him to elaborate his own conception of art, rather than explaining and detailing his vision. The universality and eternity of art was way more important to him than the most recent trends, so much so that he seldom spoke about even his own work, and rather brought up a painting by Caravaggio or showed film by Dreyer or Bergman. As he said in an interview about his teaching experience, by doing so Kounellis wanted to dismiss the stereotype of originality and novelty, usually nourishing the ambition of emerging as well as established contemporary artists, by making the students grow aware of the cultural stratification they belong to. When he arrived in Düsseldorf, Kounellis, as all the other professors, was assigned a room in the academy to be used as a studio. He never stayed there, and let the students use it as their studio or as an exhibition space. Everything in the class was communal and shared. The one-on-one talks between the professor and the students always took place in front of the entire class. In this respect, we might say that the entanglement of intimacy and publicness, personal history and universal worldview, which is so distinctive of Kounellis' art, imbued also his teaching practice. It's nearly impossible to determine and to specify the legacy of Kounellis vis-à-vis such a diverse group of artists and practices, which couldn't look different from each other and mostly diverge from the art of Kounellis. However, the tension between elements which are apparently opposing, that is a distinctive trait of the work of Kounellis, seem to be explored in many ways by the artists who worked and studied with him too. Eduard Winklhofer, for instance, always searches for a balance between elements which elicit the most dramatic associations. For instance, by placing a group of lamps into an old wooden boat, or by creating the perfect shape of a circle within a wall of books by using a grinding wheel. By such a violent yet almost surgical gesture, he rubs down the books until the friction would burn their exposed surfaces, resulting in the deep blackness of the circle. Another form of duality inspires the practice of Christiane Löhr, whose work often consists of extremely delicate and fragile, yet almost geometrically precise compositions of natural elements, such as animal hair, birds, and seeds. The artist has kept a photograph that you can see of the presentation of her work during the annual student exhibition at the Academy of Düsseldorf in 1996, which used to take place every February. Christiane recalls that, standing in front of her pieces, Kounellis recounted the story of a religious order of pilgrims who used to repeat the same prayers, only changing the tune or the intensity of their litany while moving from one monastery to another. Just to give you the sense of which kind of critique Kounellis could make of the work, like by referencing something that at first sight could sound not really related to the work, but actually broadening the spectrum of the work and reconnecting it with an history, with a tradition. Kounellis went further in commenting on the duality of ephemerality and preciseness, repetition and uniqueness in Christiane Löhr's work, and in 1997 he wrote a text about Christiane Löhr in which he applied what looks like his method now, so to speak. He dug out sources with which the artist's work resonate by quoting Archivio Kounellis and referencing Maliewicz's Black Square to explain the essence and the essentiality of Christiane Löhr's art. Kounellis wrote many small, short presentations for exhibition of his former students. So the one he wrote for Christiane Löhr is just one example of that. The students in Düsseldorf was often encouraged by Kounellis to show their work and to install and to conceive small installations. The artist always assigned the major importance, as we saw in the photo of the Ionian exhibition in 1994, to the relationship between the art and the space where it's installed, to the extent that, as Christiane Löhr effectively summarized, for him the artwork coincided with the exhibition, and the exhibition space was his actual studio. In this respect, the theatrical experience was extremely relevant for Kounellis, who often spoke about theater to his students. Through the several collaboration and the friendship with important playwrights and directors, such as Einar Müller, Kounellis honed his skills in installing art in space. What's the essence then of Kounellis' legacy as a mentor to younger artists? Borrowing the words used by Christiane Löhr to explain her vision of Kounellis' art to me, through the dramatic intensity of the installation, Kounellis was able to share with anyone his effort to see beyond the visible and transform the artwork into the observation point from which to explore the universal aspects of the world and the human nature. The commitment in the effort was the parameter by which Kounellis measured the credibility of any artist. Only becoming completely free to express themselves and growing aware of the cultural roots of their practice, artists could reach that credibility that was the essential aspect of the artistic message for Kounellis, as Eduard Winklhofer confirmed to me. Credibility transcended any medium specificity and had to do with the rigor by means of which artists could become real authors and be held accountable for their creation vis-à-vis the outside world and, more importantly, their innermost identity. So now a video will be screened of the interview, of the conversation that I had with Bruno Corà and Michel Coudray. You will notice that they will expand on a few concepts that I very briefly mentioned here. And the video is basically split into two different parts. The first part is a more general survey of Kounellis' years as a professor in Düsseldorf. The second part is divided into small sections by quoting a brief text by Kounellis that Kounellis wrote when he was asked to elaborate about what teaching meant to him. And I read those texts to Michel and Bruno, and they commented on that. So that's how the video is structured. So we can...
Io penso che generazioni non ci pensava molto, giovani artisti sì, cioè lui li prendeva tutti, cioè per lui un artista andava da Caravaggio al giovane artista che si presentava al suo corso, non è che lui ha mai diviso le cose in generazioni oppure abbia pensato di appartenere a una generazione diversa. Sì, era un dato di fatto, però non dava a questa cosa una grande importanza, penso. Invece il rapporto con l'artista per lui era sempre molto stimolante, ecco, quello senz'altro. Lui non aveva mai insegnato, né aveva mai pensato di insegnare, ed è il suo amico Markus Lüpertz che glielo ha proposto. Gli ha proposto di diventare professore all'Accademia di Düsseldorf e questo lo ha molto interessato, lo ha molto motivato, eccitato, angosciato perché non l'aveva mai fatto e perché chiaramente insomma, non aveva un metodo. Ecco, allora dunque lui è arrivato a questa accademia dove i professori scelgono i loro allievi. E tutti questi allievi che si presentano e che il futuro professore deve scegliere. E Gianni li ha preso uno per uno, guardando attentamente ogni lavoro, cercando proprio di sempre trovare una motivazione, diciamo, per includere quell'allievo e prendendo l'allievo il lavoro che gli si presentava esattamente così com'era, cioè senza cercare di interpretare né di dirigere, prendendolo così com'era. Chiaramente certi allievi non li ha presi, ma nell'insieme ne ha preso, aveva una classe piuttosto allargata. Mi ricordo che Löhr che gli aveva detto Kounellis, Jannis, Professor Kounellis, non Dr. Kounellis. Gli aveva detto, vabbè. E prendeva dunque il disegno, il lavoro, la foto, così com'era, e cercava un filo, qualche cosa all'interno di questo lavoro, qualche cosa che potesse essere sviluppato. Trovava sempre qualche cosa e da quel qualcosa che lui trovava tirava fuori e ricollegava le possibilità, le ipotesi che lui immaginava all'interno di questo lavoro e faceva viaggiare questo lavoro. Faceva questo. Penso che era molto proprio socratico, non lo so come si può dire, Bruno? Socratico no.
Sì, certamente socratico, perché tutto questo avveniva con la sua parola e dunque non facendo un lavoro per dimostrarlo.
No, niente, sì. E li guidava piano piano. Nel primo anno Gianni non parlava tedesco né inglese. E ci voleva pure qualcuno che lo aiutasse a comunicare con questi artisti che erano in prevalenze tedesche, ovviamente, poi c'erano 2 o 3 asiatici, poi c'era questo gruppo di giovani artisti che venivano da Belgrado, che erano molto motivati, molto con una personalità un po' forte, un po'. E poi c'erano, insomma, una classe abbastanza allargata, e gli raggruppati erano uno diverso dall'altro, non c'era un'identità, un lavoro in comune, non c'era un tentativo di farne un gruppo, oppure solo questa capacità che aveva Gianni di leggere un lavoro e tirare fuori da questo lavoro le premesse che lui immaginava, che lui vedeva, e guidare, parlando a questo punto con il giovane artista, con l'artista, parlando piano piano, portandoli a dei risultati. Io ero affascinata. Lui scopriva la radice, che lui è molto bravo a fare questo, Gianni, scopriva la radice di un colore, di una linea, di un segno, un tratto, qualcosa, e il giovane allievo non ci aveva pensato. Io dico sempre giovani allievi, erano, ed era molto affascinante questa cosa qua, veramente. Era magico. Lui riusciva sempre a trovare una radice, un perché, qualcosa che riguardava la cultura, una tradizione, qualcosa di nascosto.
Certamente.
E adorava fare questo alla fin fine. Era proprio come, gli piaceva molto. Stava lì seduto così, guardava un lavoro molto lentamente, molto con la lieve, uno per uno. Era molto attento, molto, molto presente, molto. Questi allievi, il secondo anno, o il terzo, parlavano tutti italiani.
Eduard Winklhofer diceva una cosa che non posso dimenticare. Diceva che l'eloquenza di Kounellis durante queste lezioni, questi incontri, ancorché lui parlasse la lingua italiana, era tale che questi allievi erano incantati, diciamo, anche del suo modo di suggerire alcuni problemi, così. E questo io devo dire che l'ho subito anch'io, ancorché parlo l'italiano, o meglio ovviamente degli studenti tedeschi, perché Gianni Kounellis aveva una proprietà di uso dei termini così esatta, così precisa riguardo al problema che lui voleva, diciamo, illustrare, chiarire, che io non ho trovato assolutamente in nessun altro artista, ancorché molto più, come dire, con lo scilinguagnolo della parola. Lui era veramente, da questo punto di vista, qualcosa di straordinario. Questo lo ricorda. Ecco, poi posso dire, aggiungo un elemento che non è subito legato alla scuola di Düsseldorf che lui ha tenuto, ma all'accademia in cui a Perugia, in cui un giorno io lo invitai perché c'era una occupazione degli studenti dell'Accademia, era una occupazione di protesta. Allora io ho invitato Kounellis a tenere una lezione, diciamo, straordinaria, e per questi allievi che erano diciamo, in atteggiamento di agitazione, dunque anche poco disponibili ad ascoltare i professori. Allora gli ho portato lì un'autorevole presenza dal punto di vista della qualità artistica, e Kounellis ha fatto una conversazione ininterrotta con loro di un'ora e più. Era un silenzio impressionante e lui aveva una capacità persuasiva fortissima. E poi questi studenti il giorno dopo hanno ripreso le lezioni e non hanno più voluto interrompere. Insomma, lui è stato proprio come dire, un unguento,
sì, perché parlava per immagine, evocava un
straordinario,
mondo.
straordinario,
Sì,
indimenticabile.
questa cosa cresceva, ad ascoltare Gianni tu partiva proprio per un viaggio sulle immagini, da un quadro all'altro. Questo era bello anche.
Le associazioni.
Perché associazione, sì.
Le associazioni che lui produceva
da un'immagine all'altra.
Nella sua parola erano veramente stupefacenti, e anche con una capacità diciamo, di frizione poetica che erano straordinarie, per cui c'era un incanto, no?
Sì, anche abbinare due immagini l'una all'altro attraverso un strano filo.
Che,
appunto,
che era il modo di lavorare di Gianni.
Fuori.
Gianni ha sempre messo insieme appunto struttura e sensibilità con questa frizione che generava stupefazione poetica. Questa era la forza di Kounellis, insomma, oltre alla sua capacità diciamo, di elaborare un pensiero anche di carattere, diciamo, strategico sul piano della forma, sul piano di quelli che sono gli aspetti fondamentali del linguaggio artistico.
Grande rispetto sempre, aveva proprio grande rispetto per
chi aveva di fronte, i giovani.
Sì, prendeva il giovane molto più sul serio di quello che magari il giovane pensava.
Lo induceva.
Sì, lo induceva, cioè lo
prendeva
così tanto sul serio che il giovane, per forza di cosa, diventava
serio.
un artista
il
giorno dopo. Non preparava niente, però guardava attentamente i lavori, ma non è che se li portava a casa oppure questo, no. Non preparava. Ma non ha mai preparato niente. Ogni volta che Gianni ha parlato, vero Bruno?
Certo.
In pubblico, preparava nel senso che per ore e ore prima, sigarette in bocca.
L'obiettivo aveva.
Sì, aveva un obiettivo e lui centrava. Il problema era centrare l'argomento. Sì, quello era molto come un cacciatore, come un... così proprio anche con grande intensità, era abbastanza straordinario guardarlo. Poi partiva da quel punto che lui aveva centrato, da lì poi allargava.
Una civiltà umanistica parte da quelle misure che hanno come metro l'uomo. Bisogna avere la capacità di dirlo in un momento in cui nessuno vuole saperne dell'uomo. Un professore con una certa cultura umanistica parla dell'uomo, ma non parla solamente di quello, parla di arte, cioè aiuta gli allievi a proporre una forma sviluppata.
Vuol dire la cultura umanista, non vuol dire umano in modo particolare, Bruno?
No,
è
più, vuol dire riferimento alla
riferimento alla misura, riferimento, l'ha detto 1000 volte, quello che si può fare, non è che si può fare tutto.
Per esempio, quando abbiamo avuto l'opportunità di collaborare al Museo di Capodimonte per questo lavoro in cui c'erano nel pavimento decine e decine di grandi orci, e sul muro a destra e a sinistra, in fondo, nel Salone dei Camuccini, delle lamiere con dei sacchi, eccetera, io gli chiesi qual era, diciamo, l'idea che sottintendeva questo disegno plastico, perché era anche a scultura, era pittura, scultura. E lui mi ha detto, vedi, l'impianto è umanistico perché è una croce. Allora, la croce come appartenente a una cultura cristologica che è stata alla base anche dell'impianto umanistico e poi anche dal punto di vista culturale. Lui mi ha risposto così, l'impianto, vedi, è umanistico perché è a cruciforme. Questo quindi Gianni intendeva umanistico come appartenente a una sfera di interessi che riguardavano la cultura, diciamo,
Sì.
occidentale, culturale,
Sì, sì.
che abbiamo avuto, ecco,
che poi...
nella letteratura, nella poesia,
Sì, sì.
nella musica, in tutti i sensi.
E poi l'ha difeso questa cosa qua perché ha capito, da molto tempo aveva capito che questo era un bersaglio, perché la cultura umanista oggi, come oggi, non è neanche più tanto il punto di riferimento di...
Sì, ma infatti lui...
E lui l'ha detto in un testo, sono l'ultimo degli umanisti, ha i suoi rischi e pericoli, perché effettivamente non è oggi come oggi, quasi quasi non è una posizione difendibile.
Lui infatti, sceglie una società umanistica, come dice lui, sceglie una vita umanistica di fronte a una società che sceglie la serialità, sì, dice lui.
Sì,
no?
Sì, la serialità, questo era l'umanesimo era l'antidoto
alla società consumistica.
Sì.
La serialità è quello, no? Il consumo delle copie.
E per lui era un argomento centrale.
C'era bisogno di trovare la drammaturgia adatta per costruire una classe dove i giovani studenti potessero formare la loro personalità artistica con una lingua nata dal dialogo e dalla critica. La classe morta di Tadeusz Kantor indica l'importanza della nozione di classe e serve come indicazione drammatica per rivelare l'esistenza di un gruppo di giovani in un dato momento storico, che imparano la tecnica appropriata per quella costruzione espressiva che la storia illumina.
Tutta l'arte dall'antico fino al 400, no? Nella plastica, nella scultura, nel bassorilievo c'è la classe. Ai tempi del Petrarca, eccetera, si vedono queste sculture del 400 con la classe, proprio il docente
Questo è vero.
E la classe.
E lui era così, era proprio in mezzo ai suoi allievi.
La trasmissione di un sapere da persona a persona, no? Come se Kounellis in quel momento anche facesse trasparire una conoscenza del fatto, per esempio, che in Germania c'era stato Bauhaus, una scuola con dei professori come Klee, come Kandinsky, come tanti altri, Mies van der Rohe e così via. Una scuola e degli allievi che si trasmettevano un certo tipo di cultura in un certo momento storico. Tanto che questa scuola è stata chiusa dal nazismo, perché aveva un peso così forte nella coscienza contemporanea che bisognava comunque farla fuori, diciamo, no? E io credo che lui avesse una conoscenza così puntuale di tutto questo che quando insegnava si ricordava dietro la testa che bisognava trasmettere anche questo tipo di responsabilità, no? Diciamo.
E poi c'è l'amore per il teatro, perché Gianni è anche molto uomo di
Cantor.
Sì, e non soltanto canto, ma insomma il teatro è la sua seconda anima, non so come la si può, molto.
Perché il teatro per Gianni parte da Caravaggio, Caravaggio,
certo, assolutamente.
Parte dalle ombre, no?
Sì, lui...
E parte anche dalla tradizione greca, antica.
Sì, ma insomma la drammaturgia ce l'ha.
Parte dalla tragedia.
Questo. Sì, chiaramente.
Quindi
sì.
Apollinio Dionisiaco e tutto, cioè il teatro era anche il dramma soprattutto, perché Gianni funzionava attraverso un dramma, perché se non c'è dramma non c'è arte, ecco il punto.
Sì.
Anche proprio perché Kantor, come sappiamo, si metteva in scena, no? Anche lui con gli attori e con tutto quello che era la macchina teatrale, non era fuori, esterno, così che Gianni nella scuola era protagonista insieme agli allievi di un fenomeno vivente, non di qualche cosa che bisognava aspettare l'esame, era tutti i giorni, quello era la scuola. era proprio la quotidianità sul discorso dell'arte mantenuto vivo attraverso il lavoro degli allievi. Quindi anche per lui era un'esperienza.
Infatti ha portato i suoi allievi fino alla fine e non ha più avuto voglia di continuare
Ma Gianni
a fare
si
il
specchiava.
professore.
Secondo me si specchiava.
Beh, perché l'esperienza, perché erano arrivati al quadro, era arrivato a
Ma io sì,
un risultato.
penso che lui anche si specchiasse
Sì, sì.
in questi giovani per ricordarsi di un Kounellis giovane come loro che aveva dovuto
Sì, sicuramente.
risolvere, no, diciamo, la sua
Che poi
identità
sì.
in una realtà che non gli era stata favorevole.
È evidente che bisogna sapere che cosa sei e dove vai. Questo non vuol dire essere ancorato alla propria nascita, ma conoscerla, perché è evidente che siamo attratti dagli altri. La novità è che non li contraddici, cerchi di sapere da loro e molte volte vedi chiaramente che loro hanno ragione. Dunque la nascita non è un fatto sclerotico, ma è piuttosto un fatto liberatorio, cioè tu con gli altri, però con un destino.
Nella globalizzazione non c'è un destino, perché tu non incontri mai l'altro.
Il problema è quello, no? Mantenere questa radice, questa identità, questa appartenenza, no?
Sì.
Perché è un valore.
Cioè che si può comunicare con l'altro partendo da un'identità precisa,
scambievole.
definita. Da quel momento lì, questa identità ti aiuta a capire l'altro, il diverso. Cioè è molto importante.
Da
Se
te.
tu non da te, sì. E questo è quello che lui ha voluto fare tutta la vita. E l'unica cosa che lo interessava era proprio questo, incontrare l'altro, la diversità dell'altro e dialogare con quest'altro. Però per poter avere questo dialogo bisognava che la sua identità propria, dunque la sua cultura, la sua, non so, il suo linguaggio fosse integro. L'integrità
poi, oltre questo appunto che dice Michel, molto giusto, molto esatto, Gianni affermava anche che lui appunto riteneva di essere credibile perché aveva un fondamento.
Esatto.
Diceva sempre,
sì,
sono credibile perché ho un fondamento.
quello.
E questa cosa è molto importante, lui dava molto peso a questa cosa perché anche l'altro deve poter avere un fondamento ed essere credibile, e la dialettica avviene tra due.
La cosa importante è che non pensavo neanche per un attimo a rimanere arroccato nel suo fondamento. Il fondamento serviva solo ad essere un uomo libero per poter incontrare l'altro.
Integro.
Senza quell'integrità, secondo lui, non c'era modo di dialogare, di arricchirsi, come dice, che ha detto varie volte, scoprire che l'altro ha ragione.
Il viaggio era questo, conoscere qualcuno che avesse anche idee diverse.
Ma lui viaggiava solo per questo, l'ha detto.
Che la vedesse diversamente,
sì, sì.
Era molto avido di sapere come l'altro fosse.
Tutta la vita, fino all'ultima mostra, lui ha avuto questa pulsione forte,
sì.
Insomma.
L'insegnante non ha difesa. Lo studente è quello che prende. Dunque, il professore è completamente indifeso.
Pronto a essere disarmato, pronto a perdere, l'ha detto varie volte. Gianni in questo senso era un uomo di grandissima generosità, se questo si chiama generosità adesso non lo so, perché poi era anche un guerriero, era anche tutto quello che volete, ma preferiva la posizione del perdente, no Bruno? Perché quel perdente vince, non è che perde, insomma.
Sì, no, si vince perdendo.
Si vince perdendo, e regalando, e ricevendo.
Il problema non è quello dell'antichità, ma dell'attualità. E non esiste nessuna attualità senza un'antichità. La si ritrova in tutto. Molti studenti, e questo è meraviglioso, lo sanno per istinto, perché uno che dipinge si vede dentro la stratificazione.
La Grecia sarà servita a qualcosa anche,
Era una radice.
La
no?
matrice greca, no? penso io.
Sì, una radice. Però poi una radice che lui ritrovava anche nella latinità come conseguenza,
certo,
no?
sì.
Perciò ha scelto
Era
Roma.
questo il grande desiderio, di ritrovarlo nella... e poi di riportarlo altrove anche, allargare il viaggio. Faceva una differenza fra il nomade e il viaggiatore. L'ha detto varie volte, no? Colui che viaggia per riportare, è un costruttore in un certo senso, Ulisse, oppure, cioè che viaggia per riportare un'esperienza, diciamo, no? Mentre il nomade cammina e non si perde.
Il nomadismo in quegli anni era inteso come
sì.
travaso
Sì, un po' postmoderna.
Sì, un po' postmoderno, travaso da una modalità linguistica ad un'altra, che si poteva
puoi andare un po' in
viaggiare
giro a
attraverso di
prendere
tutto, no?
quello che ti serve.
Invece no, il viaggiatore è qualcuno che si muove ma sa dove va, perché va e quando torna deve avere un'esperienza da poter comunicare, no? Quindi è fondato, eccetera, eccetera. Il viaggio ha un suo perché, e invece l'altro, diciamo, è molto legato a una convenienza, a un uso, quello che capita, va bene tutto, eccetera, eccetera, non nomade. Questa è proprio una contrapposizione, proprio. Io credo che un lascito proprio molto forte, e non lo dico io, l'ho sentito dire dagli artisti giovani in Italia, e non solo in Italia, l'ho sentito dire in Belgio, l'ho sentito dire in Germania, certamente più in Europa, confesso, è questo. Dentro il lavoro di Kounellis viene ribadita una forte cifra etica. L'arte è un fenomeno etico, non si può prescindere da questa dimensione. Ecco, e questo sono convinto. In lui questo fenomeno etico è vivo perché gli artisti di cui lui aveva stima, Fontana, Burri, avevano avuto questa dimensione fortemente etica, e lui, guardando indietro nella storia, Caravaggio aveva una sua dimensione etica, pur essendo incorso in un assassinio, ma l'etica è riferita sempre alla responsabilità verso il lavoro. Quindi, ecco, questo Kounellis l'ha trasmesso.
Comunque io penso che in America ci sono delle persone, molto poche, qualche cosa, che pensa che ci potrebbe essere un interesse, cioè che Gianni potrebbe essere, potrebbe seminare, portare a un seme che potrebbe interessare, che potrebbe germogliare, ecco.
So, the microphone is here. So, let's jump to the final part of this. We spoke a lot about Düsseldorf, and also Michel and Bruno started by referring to Kounellis' experience in Düsseldorf. But as I said at the beginning, Kounellis, after leaving Düsseldorf, kept teaching by holding workshops in early 2000. And Calixto Ramírez attended one of Kounellis' workshops, so I'm gonna briefly introduce him, and then we can have a conversation about his experience with Kounellis. Calixto Ramírez is a Mexican artist born on the border of Reynosa with Hidalgo, Texas, who has led a semi-nomadic life. Not in the sense of nomadism, as they. This relationship to movement has consciously and unconsciously influenced his way of understanding reality, and has informed his capacity to use that experience as a tool to produce images, objects, spaces, or gestures that propose new narratives. Calixto studies at the National School of Painting, Sculpture, and Printmaking La Esmeralda in Mexico City, and spent a semester in a school exchange program with the National University of Colombia, Bogota. In 2013, Jannis Kounellis invited him to live and work in Italy, which gave him an opportunity to immerse himself in the European art scene, specifically in Italy. In 2019, he returned to North Mexico. He has been the recipient of numerous grants and awards, such as Fonca's grant Contigo la Distancia in 2018 and the Level 0 Prize in Art Verona, Italy in 2015. As well as completed residencies around the world, including the residency program at Fundación Marcelino Botín in Spain in 2009, which is the workshop held by Kounellis, where Calixto actually met Kounellis. He has exhibited in many museums, both in Europe, in Mexico, and a little bit like all over the world, in Museo Jumex, Museo del Palacio de Bellas Artes in Mexico, and other foundation and museum in Italy, such as Fondazione Memmo, and he currently lives and works in Monterrey, Mexico. So, Calixto, thank you very much again for being here today. We can just start from like a very simple question, like how did you meet Kounellis and how was it like to be with him at that workshop, and at what stage in your career you were when you met him?
Okay, I say we because it was all the group. We met Kounellis in 2009 in this workshop in the north of Spain. It's not working?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to start again. I met Kounellis in 2009 in this workshop in the north of Spain with the Marcelino Botín Foundation. So nothing, I just finished my art academy in 2009, and I saw this application and I decided like why not, because obviously when I was an art student I was a big fan of his works, not only of Jannis but also of the Arte Povera generation. So I applied, and they make this selection. I think that it was Jannis and Michel that did it, because otherwise probably the half of us we were not going to be selected. No, in the sense that, for example, send some Christmas trees burning, and all this kind of works, they were interested, or this kind of attitude in the students. So we met there, and it was, fantastic, to be there with a great master, because most of the time you see all these works and all these people in books, and then you have this opportunity to really meet them and to know history, in a direct way. So nothing. I don't think, that we can call Kounellis that we can say that he was a teacher for us, in the sense that the workshop only lasts 2 weeks. And probably for in the academy in Germany, he could follow, the process of the students, for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. I don't know how much it longs the programs there. So here was just like the mentor, and he was aware of that. So that's why when he arrived, he said to us very clear that he was not interested in final products. He was more interested in just generating a dialogue in between us, with themes that he thought that can push us, to think about our identity and global problems, like obviously globalization and these kind of things that always were around, in Johnny's thought, So that's how more or less we met, We became friends, and well, I'm sorry.
And what were you doing back then? You had to show Kounellis some of your art, all the people in the workshop were required first.
Yes, to be inside of this group, in the application form, they ask you for a motivation letter or letter with the reason you want to assist. And in that time, I was doing a lot of videos, but not like with the video language. I mean, it was taking the sculptural, the painting, the drawing language, and translate this to the video. So that one was, for example, an example of how I was translating the sculptural language into the video one. No? So it's called antimonumento, and it's just like an antithesis of what a sculptor is. You know, in this way, if the sculptor needs to have a weight, here it's I was just desmaterializing. It's said like that. The sculptor, no. Yeah. If a sculptor, it's a material. I mean, let me see. Okay, so anyway, don't worry. I was doing like this kind of works at the end of the art academy, and I sent, you know, my portfolio only with this kind of works, you know. One of them, like these ones, were more with logic, the sculptural logic. Other ones were more like pictorial, and the other ones were more like with drawing concerns. But always using the video to expand these languages.
Yeah. And these, you were telling me that that was the first. I mean, before like showing him like videos, you thought about like showing him these?
No. I mean, I sent, you know, my application, and they choose me, you know. Yeah. But after the first day, you know, that Kounellis arrived and he presented himself, we were a group like of 16 students, and only one of them speaking Italian. The other ones we speak in Spanish. I mean, it was a guy from Colombia, 4 Mexicans, other guys, girl from Spain, and one girl from Turkey. And the only one that used to speak in Italian was Justin, that he was an American, but living in Italy since a couple of years ago, because he got married, you know, with an Italian woman. So, like Bruno, or like you explained, you know, like he arrived and he's just speaking Italian, and we were like, but I mean, obviously, in between the Italian and the Spanish, there are some like similar things. So everyone, we start to catch, you know, some words, some concepts, and we start to make our proper links, you know. And well, anyway, that first day that Jannis was talking, you know, at the end he said, well, tomorrow bring your works or portfolios, because you're going to show the works to each other, so you can start to know, you know. But he also said, bring printed things, you know, photos, así. And I get a little bit nervous, because I send only videos, you know. And he said, no, not in the computer, not. So that night, you know, I went, you know, in the night in Santander, and like I was explaining with the other work, you know, my process in that time was like trying to push the monuments as a thing, like an idea of anti-monument, you know, to speak about this, but outside of that monumentality, weight, material, you know. So I just start to walk around Santander with this kind of clay that it's an air drying modeling clay, you know, that it's called DAS. And I went just to the commemorative plaques, or when they say like Christopher Columbus arrived, So, and I start to make this imprints in the letter. The cast, I'm sorry, to present it, you know, as a kind of monument, but without really representing a monument, you know. I mean, with the years, then I realized, you know, this link or connection with the alphabet of Kounellis and his first interest when he was like trying to get out of the, I mean, not of the canvas, but out of the pictorial representation, no? So his concerns were more like with the painting, and mine were more with the sculpture in that time. But I mean, I cannot say that this is a work, you know. This is just an exercise that I did that night, because I got like this sensation like I need to show something, you know. But at the end, you know, the second day I arrived and I showed my videos in the computer, and it was not a problem. In fact, you know, it was a really nice conversation that we generate with us, also the other students, watching all these works, you know.
And what's like Kounellis' response or like critique to your work? What did he say to you? How did the conversation started? Did he respond somehow to your work during those weeks? I mean, you did also some other works while you were there, and you were going to see now another video.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not like he sit down with me and talk, you know, and drink a coffee and talk, you know. It was just like arrive with, you know, smoking his hour. I said, bravo, bravo, bravo. Then he just like went, or he just like with the head just saying like, okay, continue, you know.
Okay.
So, but at the same time, you know, he was like, he knew, you know, that in my practice it's important this the wandering thing, you know, so walking around. So he used to talk me about Brancusi, you know, and this desire, you know, or this idea when Brancusi walked from Romania, you know, to Paris in that time, and it was a walk of almost, I don't know, 18 months, and it was like this desire, you know, of Brancusi to be in the art center in that time of the world, that it was Paris, you know. So, like you also say, you know, with the text to Christiane, you know, that it seems that what he's saying to you doesn't fit or doesn't make sense, but at the end of the day, you have a kind of revelation, you know. It's like, I think that, and even, you know, we don't, after all these years, you can always think in different ways, you know, all these things that he used to say, you know. It's like when you read a book and after 10 years you read it again and you get another things, you know. So it was more like that, my kind of conversations with, with Jannis. It was something like more hermetic maybe, but very clear, you know. I mean, he was just like talking in a very general way and passing from one thematic to another. I mean, from art to economy to music to that. So you, at the end of the day, you were like, what does he told us, you know? But at the same time, like also Bruno said, you know, we all got the sensation that he was saying, I mean, he was like saying something, you know? So that's why in this residency we start to organize also our night sessions.
Yeah.
At the Otto, you know. So all the students, you know, we get into a room, open some beers and start like, okay, what did you understand? What did you understand? So we start to share, you know, or things. And in that way, you know, Kounellis was already activating the workshop, because for him was very important that dialogue and the conversation. So in that way, I mean, the second night we already were like making these dynamics after being almost all the day with Jannis at Villa Iris, no?
Yeah. And like, so you did like during that residency, you did other, I don't know if you want to call them exercises?
Exercises, yes, because I mean, I don't put this in my portfolio, you know.
Okay.
But,
and so like expanding like from like video to like these like more like sculptural, like site specific.
Site specific, I would say, you know.
Works.
I mean, the thing is that also in these night sessions, you know, we decide as a group that we want to propose to Kounellis to make something, you know, because I mean, it's nice, you know, to talk, but it could be also like a little bit like too much, you know, and more when you don't understand 100% the language, no? So that's no, but I mean it was nice because I mean you don't understand, but at the same time you were always getting something, you know. So we proposed this to Kounellis. He agreed, and he said, "Okay, let's put the train, you know, as a pretext to start to produce things, and anyone can be free, you know, to understand the idea or the metaphor of the train."
So basically, he picked the train as a metaphor for all of you, like a starting point.
And
for
I mean, he used to love the idea of the train in the sense that, I mean, the first part of the train is like the present, and the wagons are like certain periods of time,
okay.
And then the last wagon, for him, it was modernity.
Okay.
So it was like
a lineage.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I make the two little actions that were in the other slide. No, we'll leave it like that. You know? But I mean, in Mexico, by the fact that I didn't have never a studio, or I must say that the outside was like, I understand like right now the outside as a big studio, but in that time, you know, it was because I didn't have the money to afford one, and my apartment was very little. So I was very used, you know, to work always outside with the materials that I found, and trying to make work in context, you know. So here, you know, I had the opportunity, you know, to make or develop some sculptural ideas. So this blackboard was there, you know, in the foundation. So I just I also find this bucket, you know, there. I walked to the beach and bring some sand, and the rope, I think, was already there. And I mean, I just make it a hole, and it starts to work like a kind of how do you say it in English? Like the clock, you know, that works with the sand.
La clessidra.
Sì, questo in italiano, però.
How do you say clessidra? Hourglass. Hourglass.
Yes, thank you. And the phrase, you know, it's an appropriation that I took from Nicolás Guillén, that it's a Cuban poet, and it was, you know, something that talks about time. So it was just like this idea, you know, the train, that you're in movement, but at the same time you're just sitting there. So it's just like a juxtaposition.
Like something fixed, but also like incorporating time.
Yes.
Yeah. And so towards the end, you made a video that was like at the end of the.
Yeah, the video, it was more like a kind of gesture, you know, with the other guys in the workshop, and also with Kounellis, and it's just like an ending thing, you know. As so Maria Jimeno, it's in the left side, you know, like just cleaning a white piece of cloth, you know. Yeah. Then it's Justin playing the guitar, Kounellis just with his presence there, and I buried, you know, this like time capsule that I built, and with the help of everyone, you know, we start to fill it with, you know, objects, images. Kounellis, you know, he just used to drop the butts of his cigarettes.
Of course.
Inside, and it was his presence, you know, in understanding his language. So at the end of the residency, you know, we make I make this action. It was not presented to the public. It was just something more for us, you know, Michelle, Jannis, and the other students. And what other detail? Well, I also leave my shoes, you know. So I ended the workshop without shoes. so Nicolás, you know, give me some of them. So, I mean, for me it was also nice, you know, to make a hole in the garden of this prestigious foundation and leave something that nobody can see in their garden, you know. I don't know if it's still there, I hope, no? So probably, I don't know, I can return in 10 years and try to see if it's still there. And this thing, los muertos son más que los vivos, means like the dead people, you know, it's always more than the one who are alive. And it's something that Jannis used to say it or repeat, you know, in the workshop. You know?
So that's something that Kounellis
said. See, so I took this phrase, you know, obviously I translated to Spanish, and because he used to talk also about the ghost or the phantoms, you know, that lives inside of the museums, that it's almost like dead people, you know, these artists, you know. So, you know, those kind of metaphoric things that he used.
Like the idea of a lively presence of history in like our present condition or our current time. Yeah.
So, I mean, those are like some objects, you know, that everyone, you know, decide to put inside of the box. You know? Whether it's the Marlboro, the white Marlboro with the ones of Jannis, and this piece of sculpture was of Justin, that I think that the Magazzino Museum already collaborate or make with Justin Randolph Thompson. And well, it was like that. But anyway, it was also an exercise. It's not part of my work, you know.
But then, like, since then, like, you developed like a relationship and you like became friends with Kounellis and with Michel.
Yes, in fact, you know, I can say that my relationship with Kounellis, more than as a teacher, it's more like as a mentor. I mean, I don't know if it's a difference between mentor and teacher. Because
maybe
teacher,
like, maybe.
I mean, in Spanish it is, so that's why I say a mentor, or as a friend, you know, and like all of us, you always learn things from your friends, no? So it was more a friendship thing, you know. So they invite me, you know, since 2009 to stay in Europe. And I say, thank you, but right now, I mean, I can't, you know, I need to return to Mexico. See, and the other guys look at me and say, like, Calixto, you know, Jannis Kounellis is inviting you to stay, you know. I say, but it was not possible for me in that time, you know. Then I returned in 2011 for another exhibition with that same group of artists, because we continue working as a group, and we make like 2 or 3 more exhibitions after Santander. And again, you know, Michel and Jannis asked me if I would like to stay, and I say, well, thank you very much, but no. And after 2013 that I returned again for another collective exhibition, they asked me again, and then I decided to stay. So a trip that originally I was going to stay for 2 weeks became 5 years. So, and obviously, you know, in those 5 years I learned Italian, so my connection with Jannis just turned another thing, you know, because of the language. But anyway, I mean, Kounellis, he didn't care about this, you know. He always said, talk me, you know, in Spanish, or talk me in English, you know, because he used to believe, you know, in a universal language that the artists have. So it doesn't matter if you're talking with a Chinese artist and the other one doesn't know that. We can understand each other, you know, just because of our artistic practice. So he used to think this, that it's beautiful, and it's true, you know.
Yeah. And actually, just very quickly, I don't think, hopefully it will work.
Well, yes, this is just my work, you know.
So yeah, I think that it can be interesting to see like some of the work in connection with Major Kounellis' concerns about like the sense of painting, the idea of like painting as the status of image, the short duration of your videos as almost an anti-video idea, that like something that it's almost like a still frame, and then of course that doesn't work.
No, but that good thing is a short video.
Yeah, so. Short, and so they end right before everything cracks up. Yeah. So I don't know if like we can like look very probably like other images or.
I mean, in that way, and specifically with that work, you know, it's these concerns about painting and how can we push. we can continue with the logic of a painter, but without being a traditional painter, no? So it's this kind of frontality of the image, you know. It's like, for example, also in the slides that you put from Kounellis, you put this one with, he's with the canvas, his body, and he's with the mouth, you know, he's speaking, you know, this fire thing. So it's also he's using also his body to put it inside the canvas, or to beat in certain way the canvas with something live. But in this case of Jannis, it was the fire. For me, you know, this piece was made in the south of Italy, in a town that it's called Ostuni. So it's a white town, you know. So it was just like this gesture, you know, to try to be or mimetizar,
mimic.
With the mimic, with the space, just with this gesture, you know, with this frontality. And since 2009, you know, I started to work with videos of 15 seconds, 30 seconds, you know, because when I meet Kounellis, I mean, the Antimonumento, it's a video of 30 minutes or something like that. That you don't need to watch it from the beginning, you know. It's just something that is happening. So it doesn't matter if you arrive at the middle of the video, you know, because I'm not telling a story. No. It's just the time that it's there, you know. But anyway, I'm sorry?
And speaking of the centrality of body, as like we said about Kounellis, that like the human size, the size of human body was so important for him. In some of your work, you use your own body as well, and you like incorporate your body in the work, as in this one, for instance, or other.
Yes, I mean this idea of the body inside the work, or using the body as a tool of measurement, you know, for the reality. Maybe it was since the Mexican years, but I must say that I became more conscious in my years in Roma, or in little talks, you know, with Jannis, in the sense that Rome, it's the architecture of Rome, even when you can have these monumental places like the Coliseum or El Pantheon, they're still, you know, in a human scale. It's not like, for example, here in New York, I mean, not Cold Spring, but New York, you know, these skyscrapers, you know, that you lose, you know, that human scale, you know. But in Roma, you know, this thing is like very present, you know. The rhythm, you know, in the architecture, you know, the scale, yes, but always, you know, in a human measure, you know. So yes, I mean, I think that I started to get more conscious, you know, about using my body in Rome than in Mexico. I mean, in Mexico I used to make actions, but it was more like the action and not these thoughts about how I was using the body, no? So this is one of the first things works that I did in just arriving to Rome. So it was like this thing, you know, to finding my place in the new city where I just arrived, you know. So the idea was to reject that iconic places of Rome, you know. That's why I choose like this corner, or, you know, that it could be at the same time another, whatever, any city, but with that kind of architecture, obviously, you know. And it was more like that, you know, like trying to find my place in this new city, and also the idea, in a metaphoric way, to fill the empty spaces that I found, you know, like in like trying to reactivate that spaces that we found sometimes in the streets, in the alleys. So this is one of my first things, you know, in the Roman wall, you know, in Trastevere.
And getting a little, I was wondering, so this photo, for instance, shows Kounellis and you in Mexico City, right?
Yes, this is in 2016,
okay.
An exhibition that I had at the Yautepec Gallery that doesn't exist anymore. And Jannis was there because he just opened his exhibition at the museum in Aguascalientes. So they make a stop in Mexico City, and so they arrive, you know. But yes, Manca, I mean, the exhibition was called Manca, and this piece is also called Manca, that in certain ways is a counterpart of the other one, that it's also feeling an emptiness or a hole, but instead of like feeding, you know, the body inside, this one it's just like putting the body outside.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you know, it has also like this maybe like Italian references if we think in La Pietà of Michelangelo, you know, when with the arm, you know, of Christ, you know, just like there, and it's this heaviness also, you know, of the body. So even when seems like something like that, it has like some how you say, I mean, deeper ways to understand it, you know. Obviously, I was also trying to speak about a political situation that we have in Mexico with the disappeared people, with the fragmented bodies, you know, about the violence, you know, of the narco, but not the violence, you know, with blood or things like that, you know. Talking about violence in a very subtle way. You know.
Do you think this might resonate with Kounellis' idea of like addressing even politics or like contemporary issues from always a completely universal and subtle way without referencing specifically any specific political event, and like rather addressing a broader way to like reconceive the politics of body as well?
I mean, that idea is present in all his work, you know, and also in his attitude as a person, you know. He was always like very like interested, you know, in what was happening, you know. He always get very upset when the war with, you know, those kind of issues, and yes, I mean, we can read that, I think, in his works. Me as a Mexican, we have also like with the Mexican school of painting, with Rivera, with Orozco, with Siqueiros, we have also this kind of political tradition that art, you know, it's not just to decorate, you know. Yeah. It has a responsibility to society, you know. Obviously, we're not the babysitters of society, but, you know, we can make like some things. And Jannis, you know, he's from the 60s, so it's a very also political generation. So for sure, you know, so that we can find these kind of concerns in the work of Jannis, and that's why I also respect him a lot, you know, because then other artists go more like the color, the form, and Kounellis color, form, but also this other thing, you know, that gives always a heaviness, you know, to the work.
And I would just to conclude, we were like both like in the interview, Michel and Bruno, and also in my introduction, spoke about like the status of exhibition and exhibition space in connection with Kounellis' art. I mentioned what Christiane told me, that the exhibition space was his studio, and he used to work with materials that he found there and create something that would like relate to the space where the art would be installed. I think that in this respect, one of our work that you made really recently, the Palermo work, if we can see if we can jump to, it's this one, might, if it works, like to provide a different and radical way to relate to space.
Well, yes, this is in fact the last work that I did like 1 month ago or three weeks ago in Palermo. And I just wait, because I have a little writing for this one. Well, I mean, it's a piece made in Palermo. I don't know if you have ever been there, but they have like this kind of problematic with garbage. It's sometimes filled of mountains of objects, garbage. So I just make my daily walkings, picking up objects that can break, Adalberto Abate of Spazio Rivoluzione offered me this the space to make this action. So I just start to break everything, you know, because I mean it was like this thing, you know, that Kounellis told us at the Santander workshop, that it's very present, you know, at least for me, you know, that sometimes art can be violent because violence is not decorative, you know. Obviously, he's not inciting people, you know, to be violent. He's like trying to make us think as an artist, you know, that we can use violence in a poetic way. So here, more instead of a violent thing, you know, it was more like taking this ritual maybe in disuse. I think that in New Year's, in some parts of Italy, maybe in the south, they used to break the old things to expecting or hoping, you know, for the new beginning, no? So I found also this parallelism, you know, with the ceremony in the ancient Mexico, in the pre-Hispanic Mexico, that it was the new fire ceremony that every 64 or 62 years, you know, they used to break everything with the same reason, you know. So it was like this cultural thing, you know, in between I was in Palermo with Italians and the ancient Mexican thing. So it's just like breaking all these objects or this stuff, you know, hoping, you know, for a new thing, or at least that we can imagine, you know, a new reality.
Yeah. And to conclude, I was just curious if you could maybe, it's a hard thing to make, but if you have to think of like one image or one word or one anecdote, whatever, like that might represent your memory and your relationship of Kounellis, what would it be? Like, how would you summarize somehow like your relationship with Kounellis?
I mean, like this friend that has a sensibility just to arrive, say you something, but just like, I once were, you know, not at my 100%, and he got it, you know, but just without talking, you know, he just saw me, you know. So he was smoking, he arrived, and he said to me, you know what? Sometimes, you know, when you are in the deepest part of the lake, you need to scream, you know, with all your force. And otherwise, nobody's gonna hear you. And then he just,
wow.
So he was always like, wow. We didn't have like conversations like taking the coffee, you know, it was just like, arrive, he says things like that, you know. That's why I told you that for me it was always like very metaphoric, but not just for me, also for the other students in the workshop. And he used to catch you, you know, like Michelle says, you know, like, take this and he was like very precise, you know. Yeah. So for me, it's that thing, you know. But that he arrives, say you something, and that thing that even if it was just a sentence, it's still here, you know. It's still here, and
it's still with you. It stays with you. Yeah.
And you can make a lot of interpretations, you know. Depends in the moment in which you are. You know?
Yeah.
So yes, I'm happy, you know, to meet him, and also Michelle, you know. In a certain way, they saved me, you know. I was, you know, making my stuff in Mexico City, and they just like picked me and said like, Calixto, work. So he didn't say do this or do that, you know. He understood that the only thing that I was needing in that moment is just like
a push.
See, a push. Yeah. Do it, you know. We trust in you. You have the attitude. Just and get more confidence in you. And another thing that I must say, you know, it's like something that also Bruno and Michelle said, is that Kounellis gives you this serious thing, you know, even when you. But it's like, no. I need to, even if there's these small actions, like for 15 seconds, they are profound, there are like a lot of ways, to interpret, to read, these kind of actions in a very serious way.
They always take them seriously.
Yes, and that gives you a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I imagine.
When you are a young artist,
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, I'm not younger anymore. Well, 42, I'm still young.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Calixto. I don't. Do we have a few minutes for questions to open up to the floor if there are some questions from the audience? Vittorio, I don't know, are we on time? Can we? 2 questions. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't know if anybody has questions to ask. Silvia.
Thank you. This was illuminating. Thank you so much. I would like to go back to the image of the journey, and the journey that begins from a point of departure that seems to be very weighed down and aware of one's identity. And I'm just curious to hear if in the experience that you had with Kounellis, you felt that he was curious to learn more, maybe in his own maybe oracle-like way, about your own experience, before going to Barcelona, before moving to Italy, right? Like, he was departing from a particular point, but in what ways was he curious about starting the journey to learn about you and your own story?
Well, maybe like also Bruno and Michel said, that he saw his students like a mirroring thing, in the sense that I was born, for example, in this border town between Mexico and, in Mexico, but with United States in the border town. But I never lived there, and because of the work of my father, every 2 years or 4 years, I was in another town, in another city, in another country, in another So when I arrive and when I meet Kounellis, I already have traveled and lived, in several places in the north, center, south of Mexico, in United States, in Colombia, in Venezuela, in France. So maybe he just like mirrored himself, also in me, because seems like we both love to travel to meet the other one, So he gave me that opportunity, but I don't know if he wanted to learn from me, probably yes. But the thing is that he was a very busy, always with his exhibition. So even when I spent like 3 years and a half in Roma, we didn't see each other like very often, It's like sometimes like Michel called me, Calixto, we're gonna stay like 3 days in Rome, come and we go to have dinner. And then in 5 months, it was everything, by email or things like that, So it was like more that thing. But maybe he took some from me. But I'm also curious to know what was, There we are in his studio in Rome, in the garden after the exhibition with Gavin Brown. But in the Roman, in the church, in the Trastevere. And there is Alice Schivardi, Jose Angelino, that there are Italian artists, my wife Sandra, and me, Probably Michel took that image, But he used to like, to sit down and to hear the other one, And he's talk, and if you say blue, he starts, oh yes, because Ives Klein. And if you say whatever, he always just pick it, and start to talk for 5 minutes, And it was like, wow. Wow. So also, returning to this thing with the journey, with the trip, when I tried to find my identity, probably it was like very different from the other students, because it was people like, okay, I was born in Madrid and all my life I've been living in Madrid, so I'm like very. But when I met him at 28 or 29 years old that I was already from, let's say, a lot of places, you know, and so my identity is built from all this idea always of the journey of the movement, you know, and when you grow up, at the beginning it was because of the work of my father, but then when I grew up, I became a little bit addict to the movement. So every like 4 years or something, I want to move, you know. So.
Is there any other question? Maybe just one more. Yeah. So there's over there.
So I wanted to ask you if there were artists also from Asia and Africa when you went to the workshop, because I was surprised to hear so much of the word universality, which today is almost a word we don't use anymore. But in the 60s, I know was very much news, because it was something we believed on.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if today would be still possible to have a class where the teacher doesn't speak the language, because basically my understanding is that in that situation most of the people were from the Western culture, and so they were sharing a universal language somehow. So I wonder, do you think that a class like that would be still possible today if some students were also coming from faraway countries like Asia, continents like Asia, Africa, so you know, which are the ones that make us understand that today that the idea of universality doesn't really apply anymore. Does it make sense?
Yes, for sure, you know, and I think that people took that, you know, the same way like with us, you know, in a very universal way, in a very artistical language, you know, a point is a point, a line is a line, you know. So it's for sure, you know, I mean, and he used to respect a lot, for example, I don't know, so the artist, not because of his nationality, just because he has the freedom, you know, to be an artist. So I think that, of course, you know, I mean, in fact, and probably I think that in Germany, Michel speak about that, no? That there were, most of them probably there were Germans, but there were also some Asian,
South Korean.
In my workshop, it was surprisingly like a lot. I mean, 5 people from Latin America, you know. But yes, you know, I recognize that we have this cultural things, you know. I mean, if Kounellis talks about Caravaggio or Pollock, we can understand it. But probably right now an African also, I mean, knows those big names, you know. So I think, but I mean, with this thing about teaching in another language, in a certain way, Jannis remind me a book, you know, that it's called The Ignorant Schoolmaster, 5 Lessons in Intellectual Emancipation, you know, but this French philosopher that it's called Jacques Rancière. And I'm not saying, you know, that Kounellis read this book, you know, to taught classes, you know, but I'm just saying that the way he used to carry out the workshop remind me at least like 2 points that Rancière explained or put, you know, in this book, you know. So the first one, it's that he considered equality as a starting point in teaching and learning. In this way, the relationship of power between the one who knows, that it's the teacher, and the one who does not know, or the students, it's broken in order to generate an environment of doubts, curiosity to know, and perhaps answers that arise from the cultural baggage, of each one. So Jannis, as I already rather than posing a position on the student, he just talked to generate these atmospheres of doubt and curiosity, And the second thing, is it was the possibility of teaching what is not known by guiding the student intuitively and establishing the power of equality, since intelligence does not exist where there is an imposition between one person over another. On the contrary, intelligence arises when each one acts, and I think that Jannis, probably because he was a Greek origin, he was aware of Socrates in this way of teaching, Therefore, more than behaving like an explanatory teacher who studied thoughts, he became an activator of intelligence, capacities, and potentialities of each one of his students, So with this, I just want to say that, if it's an African or Asian or a Mexican or a French, for him it was the same because he truly believes in universality, yes.
Well, and on this note, I will end here. So let me just thank everyone for attending again, and